So, welcome.
Hi.
Thank you for joining me.
Yeah, definitely.
So this is for Kaleidoscope-Soul Cafe. It's just a forum for people to really speak their truths and kind of connect with other people. And we're excited to have you.
Thank you.
So like I told you prior to this, any questions that you don't want to answer, feel free to elaborate as little or as much as you would like. It's all on you. So we'll get started.
Okay.
So we'll start nice and easy. What is your favorite color?
It's really exciting. I'd have to say it's black.
Okay.
My truck is black. Most of my clothes are dark clothes. So easy.
It goes with that's a neutral.
Yep.
What is your favorite time of year?
Time of year, that's a tough one. So I was born and raised in Alaska, and it's been a while since I've been in Alaska. I want to say almost 2 decades. So I enjoy warmer seasons like spring and summer over colder seasons like fall and winter.
Okay. Are you currently reading or watching anything, binge watching something that you recommend to others?
So I haven't had a chance to dive into some of the ones that just started, but American Gods is a really interesting, trippy kind of show. It's on Stars Network. A lot of really good acting. It's pretty good. So that's kind of like more drama, but I also like silly comedy. So Letterkenny is something that we I think we binge watched the newest season in one day or
Wow.
2 days.
Nice. Yeah, American Gods, I tried to read that years ago and I put it down. I couldn't get through it, but maybe watching it would be easier.
Yeah, so that goes to, like, I don't read books. I'm a very visual person,
Okay.
so I just doesn't hold, despite being a visual person, it doesn't hold my attention to read it in text. I much rather and take it visually. So I always say I didn't even know it was a book until you just said it.
Oh, well, yeah.
It's a weird show. It's really well done,
I bet, yeah.
but it's good stuff.
Cool. So tell me a little bit about your childhood and growing up. I know you said you grew up in Alaska, so that just sounds cool.
Yeah, definitely. So I grew up in Alaska. I grew up in a super religious conservative family in Alaska. My father was a physician assistant, and my mom was his office manager at his walk-in clinic. So kind of interesting. Super conservative family, and half the small town knew who my dad was because of him being their doctor. So um, I'm the youngest of 4 kids, which has its own interesting aspects. I kind of learned as a kid to just do what my parents asked. I got what I wanted, rather than try to go against and like test everything out with them. So they say the youngest kids are spoiled. I would say it's more the younger kids have figured out the system.
Yeah, I guess it could go either way.
Yeah. But other than that, from like a personality development aspect, I think that definitely played a role into how I ventured out later as an adult. But in terms of just growing up as a kid, I mean, there's no better place to grow up than Alaska. I mean, and especially at the time we grew up, where you could be a kid walking down a street or taking your bike down the street, and no one's questioning where your parents are, right? So I had a lot of freedom as it related to that, to just kind of going outside, outdoors, going away from the house, and not worrying about where I was going. It was just kind of like a different time than if you saw like a 10-year-old kid wandering in the forest. You'd be like, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" Like, "No, I'm just out exploring." But it was a pretty good experience, I'd say, overall.
Nice. When did you leave?
So I left. Last time I was in Alaska was 2002, and that was right before I got married. So yeah, it's been a while. And from being on the East Coast now, it's not a quick trip to go back, and it's not a cheap trip to go back.
Oh.
Kids, it's even more expensive and even more stressful. So I still have a brother there. He lives in Anchorage. I grew up in a town outside of Anchorage. But kind of don't have the desire to go back anymore. I've kind of like established myself out here and kind of doing my own thing. So
What made you leave? Was it school or love or
uh,
wanting to get out?
all of the above. So my wife's from California, and she ended up helping me get a job in California, and so I moved down and we got married in California, and then just kind of progressively through going back to school started our journey to the East Coast. Yeah, so it was kind of all of the above. I was young. I was, stuck in Alaska in the middle of winter, and a gorgeous California babe asked me to move down to California and says she can get me a job. So I mean, that just sounds like a great deal, right? You're not going to pass that up.
Sounds like good judgment. So I know that you currently do boudoir photography. Is that your main gig right now, or is that just kind of like a passion side hobby?
So I'd like to turn it into more of a profitable business. I took a stab at trying to run a photography business a couple years ago. I kind of wasn't very focused on how I did it. I was all over the place. If someone needed me to go here to take a photo, I'd do photos for them. If someone needed me to take a family portraits, I'd do them for them and go to an event. I was all over the place. I was just trying to get exposure, and I was worried about Instagram followers and the whole wrong aspect for how you'd want to run a business. So I put it aside for a while and then came back figuring I'd just do one type of photography and get really, really good at it. But it's not my side gig, or it is my side gig. It's not my main gig. I actually have a fairly boring office job at a financial institution. And, but I try to keep the two worlds separate because, as you can imagine, even though it doesn't provide a conflict of interest to where I work, it probably doesn't result in work safe conversations just because people at first blush might approach it in a very vulgar way. So I kind of keep the two separate. I think working from home almost a year now because of the pandemic has enabled me to kind of focus more on that and not have to worry about like pulling up a photo on my phone accidentally in a workspace because I'm looking at some of the photos I edited the night before. I haven't had to deal with those odd situations yet, so we'll see how that goes once life returns back to normal.
Nice. How did you get into photography? Was it something that you always enjoyed, or kind of just happened into it by accident?
I think like I mentioned earlier, I'm a really visual person. I like how stories are told in a visual way. I think there's a lot of subtleties when you watch a TV show or a movie, whether it's the selection of the colors they use, the angles they use, there's a lot that goes into it to tell a story, and I think photography is a way of doing that. Even shooting a boudoir shoot for one person in a room, you can bring out their personality and choose different angles and kind of tell a story along the way. How did I get into it? I think I always had interest for it, and my dad. I always say my dad he would take photos of everything, but they'd be like really candid photos, like almost too candid. Like you'd be in like an awkward derp face, like, and that'd be a photo, and then it'd be like posted on Facebook. Like, what are you doing? like that's so embarrassing. Like, get us to like look at the camera first or something.
It's like the paparazzi.
So it was almost kind of like, well, I can do this better. Like let me one up the old man. So he had piles and piles of, this is back when we didn't have digital, so he had piles of the printed out photos he would get, but it was never focused. It was just piles of random photos, and I was like, what is this? I know when you come across an image and you're just like, wow, like you visually are just like, that's like really good.
Yeah, like you don't even realize why you're looking at it necessarily. You're just like, cool.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, wow, that's a really nice photo, or that's a really nice portrait. And so I always had an eye for capturing that. And that's kind of the approach I've taken, is just really trying to focus on conveying a message and an emotion through a photograph, which is a little bit different than what I was exposed to growing up as it related to photography.
Nice. Have you ever been on the other side of the camera before? Any Zoolander type of male modeling?
So I don't take myself I take being behind the camera very seriously. I don't take being in front of it very serious. I think part of it is we're all our harshest critic in terms of how we look. And I think growing up in a conservative household, you were taught to be humble and not think too highly of yourself. So as a result, what ends up happening, like you feel extremely uncomfortable seeing pictures of yourself because you're just overly critical. So my way of avoiding that is just to be entirely goofy in front of the camera. I think and I think you're going to get to this in a little bit, the camping trip that we met on, I was walking around in swim shorts and a female crop top, and I didn't mind posing for the camera and being entirely silly, but to actually find a serious picture of me, or a serious selfie of me, it's a rare find. It's a diamond.
Great. So tell me a little bit about your family. I know that you have a wife. I know you have kids. So how old are they? Older, younger? Are they all living with you? Are they moved back in just because of the pandemic?
So we have 4 kids. We got married young, as typical for the religion we both grew up in, and it's very family centric. So of course the thing you do is you get married young, you start having kids, and you go on your merry way. And so my oldest is a senior in high school. She'll be going to college next year. I have a freshman in high school, a 7th grader, and a 3rd grader. So it's kind of interesting. East Coast, I'd want to say most people have kids later in life after they've gone to school, after they've started their careers. So we're kind of still fairly young, and our kids are a lot older, which means we're kind of reclaiming our marriage at this point, because we're able to leave the house without trying to get a babysitter.
Yeah.
I mean, we have no family on the East Coast, so to go out, it's not as easy. We spent a lot of time inside when the kids were young. We didn't get out very much, but now we're reclaiming that, and we'll go on road trips and visit friends, or just even going out to eat and getting away from the kids for a little bit to kind of connect again as a couple. So it has its benefits. It was hard raising a young family, and it was hard starting my career, my boring office job career. It was hard starting that when everyone else around me didn't have a responsibility to go home to. So they could stay out for the happy hours. They could stay out and be mildly irresponsible. Meanwhile, I have a family to go home to and kids to take care of. And my money's going elsewhere to the kids and supporting the family, not going to my happy hour budget, if you will.
Yeah, that's definitely a different dynamic. I know right now, a lot of my friends are having kids, and I don't have a kid yet. And so it's interesting. I mean, this year obviously was obviously we didn't see anyone really that at all this year, but just in general, it's like, oh, can you come out? Oh, we used to go out late, and they're like, oh, I'm home, or my friends with dogs, oh, I gotta go let the dog out. And I'm like, oh, it's like so difficult to see as many people as you are used to seeing when life is in a different area. So
well, if you want a kid, I can lend you one at a really good rate, really affordable. I'll let you pick which one you want, and I'll charge you an appropriate rate. I'm happy to do some sort of kid exchange like that.
Very generous. I have a bunny. We can do a little trade-off.
Something tells me I'd rather take the bunny than the kid, for sure.
Having a wife and kids, do they ever say anything or make comments, or maybe they've kept it to themselves, about you doing boudoir photography? I mean, do they know what you
Mhm.
do?
They do. So it's kind of a funny evolution. So we grew up super religious, and we're not very religious anymore. But what we did take from it was the quality, the family centric qualities of religion, of having a close family unit. So it is kind of a sideshow being at our dinner table if you're visiting our house, because there's a lot of "that's what she said" jokes, and there's a lot of conversations that probably make people feel uncomfortable that they're having, that kids are being there at the table present for. But if you think about it, when you were a kid and you were in middle school and high school, you heard all that stuff. So what's the point of acting like it doesn't happen? So we're fairly open with our kids on just life in general. Like, I'd rather have them come to me than learn something or have a preconception about sex or drugs or anything like that because of a bunch of immature teenagers that are around them. So when I did started photography 2 years ago, I was building my portfolio shooting with models, but it was just standard portraits. It was nothing that was risque in any way. And when I kind of revisited the thought during 2020 on going back to photography again and where I was going to focus on, um, I flat out just told them. I was like, listen, dad's doing a style of photography. It's like popular for like brides before they get married to do something like this for their husband. And and so when dad's editing photos, his room's locked. So you're knocking before you coming into the bedroom, right? Like, I'm still respectful of those boundaries. They don't need to see the photos necessarily that I'm working on. But then again, like, my oldest is on Instagram and she follows my Instagram account and sees the final product anyways. But yeah, so I don't didn't really try to hide it too much from them
Yeah.
because that is too much work. And really, I think that's what I grew up with was that that those two different worlds where the religious part of it is, it's one aspect and this is how you should be, but then you don't talk about life.
Hmm.
So now it's kind of like, no, this
The
is
best
how
of both.
it's meshing them both together, and it's so much less work than trying to act like they both exist, but they aren't, but that they're mutually exclusive and never cross over.
Well said. I know that staying active, obviously, as we age, is important. I first, like you mentioned earlier, I met you and your wife on a camping trip, and obviously it was very eccentric times. I know that you have participated in Spartan races and do a lot of travel. Like you mentioned, you're trying to go out a lot more now that your kids are older. Would you say that traveling and fitness are other passions of yours, or would it be
So
something else?
so I would say, um getting so when I kind of burned myself out mentally on photography, like I said, I was all over the place. I wasn't focused, I wasn't getting results. I was spending hours in front of the computer and kind of not having any income to show for it or any money to pay back all the gear I invested in. um and I just burned myself out. So then our mutual friend Jeff mentioned he was doing a Spartan race, and I said, "Those look fun. I should do them." I'm a big guy. I'm 6'2". I was an athlete in high school. I was like, I can do these. And I got hooked. And it was kind of, not only was it a physical challenge, but it was also kind of a mental reset and remembering a part of me that I hadn't touched for a really long time, which was how active I was as a kid. So I kind of reconnected and just reset mentally. And then I March of 2020, I did a Spartan race. It was supposed to be the first US Spartan race of the season. And a week later, everything shut down under quarantine. Yeah, I wouldn't say fitness was a concern during quarantine at all. I kind of undid all the work I did during 2019. But I'm signed up for races again. Hopefully they go forward in 2021, and I'll be getting back on that track. So I think it started to become a focus. Definitely this last year has been an exceptional year. And I mean, who would have ever thought a year ago that I'd be working from home for a year? That's
Yeah.
just at least for my career. And now I'm sitting here and almost about to hit a year, and it's just a different life now. So yeah, it's becoming more of a focus. I think eventually, once all the kids get older, we'd like to travel internationally more. But I think just generally, you sacrifice so much as a young parent, you lose yourself. And to get really deep right now, I think a lot of what uh, couples struggle with once they get married, they see what they see on TV, they see the love stories, they see the romances, they don't see all the other struggles and how hard it is to actually live with somebody and disagree but still sleep in the same bed at night. And kids don't help out with that stress at all. It just is one other thing to fight about. And I think now that the kids are getting older, you're able to focus on yourself again, because you lose yourself and you lose a part of yourself. And if you don't remember to find yourself, then that's where marriages break up and where families fall apart. And part of it is to remember too, even for, I think you recently got engaged, right?
I did.
Is to remember that over time, as relationships evolve, you change yourself as well. So people get married and then expect to be married 10 years from now to the same person they got married to, and people change. Who would have thought that we were married 18 years this last August. Who would have thought 18 years ago that I would have tattoos with the beard, doing boudoir photography, not going to church, having an occasional drink. It just was unheard of. And it's a transition. And if you're not open to that transition and open to change yourself, yeah. So that's kind of where I'm at. I'm living my best life right now. But it didn't come easy, and there was a lot of work put on early on.
Nice. Yeah, it definitely seems like when you were talking about the races and all that stuff, it almost seems like it's more of a mental thing to be able to like follow through on a commitment to yourself or to something that you're training on, or just to be like, wow, I can actually do that. I know for me, go ahead.
It's interesting because one of the last races I did before all the races were canceled, it was the hardest race you could do in the whole Spartan circuit, and it's in Vermont, in Killington. And our friends Jeff and Kenny, when I told them I was doing it, they're like, "You're crazy." Like, I mean, I consider them more athletic than me, and they're telling me I'm crazy. And it was tough. I was on the mountain. It's at Killington, Vermont, and it's on the mountain, and I was there, and you're there into the night, and you have a headlamp. My headlamp wasn't working, and I barely finished before they pulled everyone off the course. I would want to say there's times where I just wanted to break down and cry, because I was like, I'm so close, but I'm not going to finish. It was all mental. It was entirely mental, but it felt good to come back and see, guys, I survived. I did it. They were like, I don't want any part of this. I don't want to do it. I was like, okay, now I really want to do it just to show I can do it. I guess that's kind of been my whole attitude, right? Is
Yeah.
Who would have ever thought I was this kid from Alaska? Now I'm on the East Coast, entirely different life. I'm always seeking to do more. Being the same person to me is boring.
Do you have someone or something that inspires you? I guess it could be either photography or just day-to-day living.
I think when it comes to inspiration, it really comes down to, it's not so much a person, but concepts. The concept of kind of when you see one of those quotes and you're just like, whoa, that hits hard. And really analyzing, why does it hit hard? Like, where is this quote talking to me? Like, do they know me, right? And really finding inspiration in just how crazy life is, I guess. It's a weird answer.
No, I get it. Yeah, because I love Pinterest and scrolling through that stuff, and I'm always like, ooh, let me screenshot that quote and that quote and that quote, and then I'm like, oh, I'm so inspired. But like, you kind of like, it goes out the window after you read it, but it holds you for like.
Yeah, and then you have your phone has like 1,000 quotes that you never revisit. You're like, oh well, that meant something to me in the moment, but now that was yesterday. Now it's today. Yeah, and I think part of it is you learn a lot about yourself, and I learned that I really do well with praise. I really like to get gold stars from people, as I call it. Right? Is I just like recognition. It feels good. Who doesn't like to be told, "Oh my gosh, that's so awesome," or "Oh my gosh, your photos are so amazing." Um, it's always been, I think, the 5 love languages. That's one of them, is words of affirmation, right? And that's kind of that's definitely one of mine. Is I love to be told how great I am. Who
Oh,
doesn't?
good. We're gonna send you a medal in the mail after this interview.
Yeah, exactly.
You did
It's gonna have your face on it. It's like, you did it. So I think I think I just don't I also don't like being underestimated, and that's enough to me for me to drive me to show that I can do something where people thought I couldn't do it. So it's kind of a weird thing, because I really don't think that highly of myself, but boy, I like being told that I do stuff really well. And it's funny because you don't make these realizations as a kid, but it's totally why I was such a good student growing up in high school and even into my college years. Was I don't like getting bad grades. It makes me feel bad. I can do better than this. I can get that 100 on this test, and just pushing myself, where some people might be like, yeah, what's the effort? Why is it worth it?
What is something that you do to ground yourself or calm yourself down after you've had a rough day or a rough shoot?
Um, Playing Call of Duty on my phone.
On your phone.
On my phone. It's funny because my 2 teenage boys try to get me to play on the Xbox, and I'm like, and if I play with them, I know I'm going to get slaughtered, but I'm really good on my phone. I'm super good on my phone. And that's kind of, if I need to zone out, or if my wife's watching a show and I'm not too into it and I just need my quiet time, it's totally playing Call of Duty on my phone. I think now that I'm kicking up the photography stuff again, it's really easy to get sucked into staying on Instagram, and I started TikTok as well. So it's really easy to get sucked in to those apps, and I openly admit that I'm on them way too much as it is already. Um, but it's a good way to disconnect from that and still do something that kind of relaxes your mind, and probably uh I don't know. I don't know if I'd call it more self-building than social media, but
Well,
it's easier to put down at a certain than to keep scrolling and going past a feed for hours on end.
yeah, I'd almost say it's like less toxic. I mean, I know like
Still toxic, just less toxic.
still less toxic, but yeah, depending on who you're looking at and what you're thinking about these people. And I know for business stuff, it gets real easy to, especially like now where there's so much out there, to get sucked into doing, oh, I have to update this and this and this, and I have to make sure all my statuses are updated. And it's it's overwhelming and it's time consuming. So
Yeah, and you know, I'm taking a different approach now. So when it comes to the photography and social media engagement, I keep myself to a calendar. So at the beginning of the week, I kind of schedule whose photos am I going to edit, what days am I going to post on social media. You know, they didn't really have this technology a few years ago, but now there's apps where you can preload all your photos into the apps, and basically the app reminds you every day to post that photo. So no longer am I scrolling through my phone to figure out what photo am I going to post on a certain day. Now my phone reminds me, hey, press a button and post your post. And that helps me not get sucked in where previously maybe I would just get too worried about social media engagement. Now it's kind of like a set it and forget it.
nice.
Much better for mental health for sure.
Yeah, definitely. If you could give one piece of advice for any aspiring model, everyday people, or, you know, models, what would that be?
So I think something very specific to boudoir photography is how vulnerable it is. I mean, you're going in front of the camera with less clothing than you would go to the grocery store in. And
Perhaps.
perhaps you never know. Is it summer? Is it winter? Do you have a mask on? Do you not have a mask on? And one of the common things you hear with women, and you know, I still haven't booked my first client because I kind of just kicked this all off end of October, early November is when I really started to focus on bringing it back, and still working on kind of building leads. And you always hear, oh, but all your work is with models. I can never do that. So stop being so damn hard on yourself on how you look, and viewing yourself. When you're taking a selfie, or you're looking at a picture of yourself, you're looking at it through your eyes. Other people think you're beautiful. Your siblings hopefully think you're beautiful. Your parents think you're beautiful. Your significant other thinks you're beautiful. They think that for a reason, and maybe you don't see that, but at least accept it, right? And so I think for someone who wants to just promote better self-love, start taking selfies of it everywhere. Don't be ashamed. It sits on your phone. Nobody has to know you have 1,000 selfies on your phone. You don't have to post every single one of them to Instagram, but like, give yourself some credit. And for models, I think right now, you don't have to go through a modeling agency. You can successfully become a local model just by reaching out on Instagram. So hashtags are an amazing thing. And in 2018, when I started shooting, I entirely built a network up of models just from Instagram engagement, following accounts, being bold and reaching out and saying, hey, I'm a photographer. I'd like to shoot with you if you're interested. And I did the same thing when I revisited photography again. I reached out to some of my prior models, and I think to date one of my best shoots came from just reaching out cold to a model to say, hey, I'm a photographer. Here's my prior work. I'd love to shoot with you. I give you images, you give me your time, and build it that way. And so it's entirely just start following photographers and models and paying attention to who's tagging who and whose work you like, and you'd be surprised how often photographers are willing to brush up part of their portfolio because you have a unique look or you have a concept you want to execute. So like right now I'm focused on the boudoir photography, but when I was shooting in 2018, I had this one model. She's like, we got to do something. We got to have a concept that we have to have. I was like, I got it, because I had a minivan at the time because of the younger kids. And we totally did like a soccer mom shoot. And it was like all centered around the minivan and a cooler and a soccer ball and like a a lawn chair that soccer mom would take to a game, and we did this whole shoot around a concept. So if you're a model as well, like totally come up with a concept. If you go to a photographer with saying, hey, I got this great concept, the photographer is like, oh, that's one less thing I have to worry about. I'm totally willing to shoot with you.
Very cool. Yeah, I've been right before this interview, me and my fiance have been binge watching America's Next Top Model.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've ever watched it, they have girls of all different backgrounds and looks, and you know, me just sitting on the couch like totally judgmental. I'm like, oh my God, she could never win, or like, why did they pick her? Oh my God. And I know when I'm saying that, like, I know she's there because they, you know, everyone, they want a different look. They wouldn't have a show, they wouldn't have a contest if they wanted cookie cutter, everyone the same. So it's definitely interesting because you know that watching something like that, but then when it comes to yourself, everyone's so judgmental about themselves, like, oh, my nose isn't straight, or, you know, like my shoulders are lopsided, or whatever it is, or I'm not proportionate. So
Yeah, and one thing to think about for whether you're aspiring photographer or aspiring model is that, like, that America's Next Top Model, it's a whole different world. You're not going to be shooting runways. No one wears the clothes they put on runways anyways. Why do they even do it? I never understood this concept. Like, you see like the crazy designers and they have these crazy concept outfits and thousands of dollars, and everyone gets all dressed up and red carpet and everything, and I'm like, yeah, but that's not what fuels stuff. Even like if you look at a magazine, and you look at, say, like a perfume advertisement, there's going to be some sultry portrait there, and like, if that's your thing, then that's the route you go. If your thing is you just want to um, lead yourself to those opportunities, you don't have to start big. You can start small by finding a decent photographer and building out a portfolio. And a lot of photographers, you know, and this is, some photographers don't do this for money. Some photographers strictly do it as a hobby. They spend hours and hours editing one photo because they just really like doing that. Find one of them. They'll work with you. It's just such a weird world. When you say model, everyone thinks, oh, no. You, we're now to the social influencer aspect of things. And that's, I think, where the focus is now. It's no longer about, can I break it big and be a runway model or be in a magazine? Now it's, can I get endorsements? Can I get somebody to pay for, send me free product because I'm promoting it on my feed? And I really think that's where things are going in terms of social media.
yeah,
And models, at least.
yeah, it definitely seems that way. Everyone's on the gram.
They are. Do it for the gram.
Do it for the gram. All right. Well, that's all the questions I have. Is there anything else you'd like to say or leave us with, or are you good?
I think I'm good. I talked a lot.
All right, sounds good. Well, thank you for taking the time to speak with us. You did a great job, Ryan, and I will give you a round of applause, and you will get a medal in the mail.
Yep. All right, perfect. Thank you.